That's fantastic.
Or whatever. My wife will be listening in from the out from the.
So, okay, Bobby, give me one moment and we're going to go live in a few seconds here.
You tell me when you're live.
All right, boss.
Yeah, you got a lot of people on there, man.
Oh, yeah. And then there's even more watching via the stream.
Oh yeah, wow.
So, and we got people from all over the world.
It's
Um,
yeah, it's nice to see Georgine
yeah,
picture.
she's cool.
She
And
is. She's 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 a very special friend. I mean, she's grown up with. I watched her grow up pretty much. I mean, I don't even know how old she is now. She's probably in her 40s or something.
yeah,
Uh, but man, she can sing and she can play, man. I'm telling you. And when I first saw her playing at the age of 13, she was blowing these cheeks out. And usually teachers are always try to stop people from blowing their cheeks out, but you know, most of the good players blow their cheeks out, and there's a scientific reason why it's a good idea actually. And I never tried to stop her. I mean, I got her on some things, but man, she's got some chops, man. She can play like high G's and blow the
oh
walls.
yeah, she has a really strong G, man. I mean,
I know, man. I mean,
no,
she's a powerful player. She's about the size of a chipmunk too. She's a tiny little thing. But
all right. So, Bobby, we are live. And first of all, Bobby, for all of you joining us today, we have the great Bobby Shew. And for those of you who don't know Bobby, Bobby is one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest trumpet players of our time, and and greatest teachers of our time as well. And Bobby, it is an honor to have you with us, my friend.
well, it's an honor to be even thought of and to do this. I mean, I'm very flattered, but that people even know who I am. I
Oh,
sometimes joke, and I never tried to be famous or anything like that, but people tell me, God, everybody knows you all over the world. And so one of my students calls me the most famous unknown person.
well, I mean, it's like I said, it's an honor to have you. And what I was going to say is that Bobby, you've had the career, or you have the career that a lot of us trumpet players dream of, and you've done so much for us. Setting the bar so high. Let's go ahead. I'm going to let you have the floor here, and just tell us, your approach to playing and how you approach the instrument.
Well, as I started to tell you, you had asked about my beginnings. My stepfather had played for a couple of years, and the trumpet was around the house, and he couldn't play, but I borrowed his trumpet and joined the band at 10 years old, and he showed me how to read and fingerings and stuff, and it was very easy for me. I had no problem whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I went to beginning band the first day, and I could already play half of the pieces in the book. And the teacher said, "What?" so,
Hmm.
so she opened the book to the back. She said, "Did you play this last night?" I said, "No." She said, "Play it now." And I sight read it down, and she said, "Go back to class. You're not going to be in this band." And I thought I'd screwed up. I'd had the horn in my hand 5 minutes, and I'm already in trouble. But what she did is she sent me to the advanced band, and because I could already read and everything, and I could play, and I went to the advanced band at the junior high school on Saturday morning, and um, I auditioned, and I got second chair in the advanced band. My first,
Wow.
I mean, it was because I could read and I could actually play, and I knew the fingerings. I mean, the trumpet. One of the things I would say to you is, like, over the years, I've been teaching. I would say teaching with quotes around the word because I got a lot to say about that. But I gave my first lesson 65 years ago to a kid in my neighborhood, a little Italian kid, Joey Pais, and he was like 9 years old. And his mom said, "Would give Joey a lesson." I said, "I don't know how to teach." She said, "Well, how do you play?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." She said, well, show him something. And so the first lesson I gave him, I tried to show him the C scale. And, you know, that's not the most interesting thing in the world to start a kid on. And so the second lesson I showed up, well, I won't go into the whole story, but there was a Louis Armstrong album on the coffee table. And I asked him if he ever heard it. And he says, no, it's my dad's. And I said, well, that guy plays, you know, that C scale that we were playing. I said, that guy plays a tune on using only 5 notes, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I said, he goes 1, 3, 4, 5, 1, 3, 4, 5, 1, 3, 4, 5, 3, 1, 3, 2. I taught him to play Saints Go Marching In, and he was the happiest kid on the block. It took me a few years to have a realization that was actually kind of spiritual, but it was like, it was philosophical, is that, you know, sometimes when we start kids on a musical instrument, we push them into a book of scales and fingering patterns and stuff. We don't teach them music, and kids like music.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a realization after many years of trying to teach music and bring the trumpet up to the music. You follow what I mean? It's like, you know, it's just too much concentration on just technical stuff, and there's way too much concentration on don't miss a note, you know. Yeah. And it gets everybody's attention on this right and wrong issue of missing notes in front of somebody, and you get scolded for it. You get embarrassed in front of the other kids in the band if you play an A flat instead of an A natural or something, you know. And yeah. the one of the real problems with that, if you want to go into some depth about this, is I've always, since the age of 14, I read a philosophy book called The Practice of Zen by Alan Watts, because I didn't know what it was. I was reading comic books at 14, you know. But I was on a gig, and a saxophone player was a college student, and he was taking a philosophy class. And on the break, all the adults, I was the only kid on the band, and I was 14 years old. And they were discussing philosophy, and I thought, what the hell are they talking about, you know? And I saw this book, and so I went out and bought it and read it. And it got me into realizing there was some options in life, you know?
Yeah.
There was this thing about psychology. So I started studying psychology in school and college, and I still do. And I coincide philosophy and psychology because they parallel. So my point being that when you study psychology, you start studying, like, you know, not only the human mind and human reaction, but the brain and how it works. And the brain's got a lot of lobes in it that serve different purposes: reading, listening, you know, driving your car and stuff like that. But there's a part of the brain that's called the amygdala, which is the one that activates when you start worrying about making a mistake. And it's the fear factor thing, you know? And so when you put a kid in a state of fear when he's trying to learn music, he's not in the creative side of his brain. He's not even in the side where he hears music properly, and his emotions are not activated other than fear, you know. And that's a real mistake in the music education system, is that they drive kids into this state of like, oh my God, you better not miss a note, you know. And even when they audition for all-state band or anything like that, I mean, it's and you look at like people playing in symphony orchestras, they're always so uptight about missing notes and stuff like that, you know. And God, what a horrible, that's not what music's all about to me. You know, to me, and you asked me kind of like, where's my head at with music? You know, I know a lot of guys that I won't say any names here because I don't want to, you know, point any fingers at anybody, but I know some absolutely great trumpet players who are not very good musicians. They can play the living pants off of the trumpet, technical stuff, double tonguing, triple tonguing, all of the concertos, Hummel, Haydn, you know, and they can do all that stuff. but they can't play bars of nothing without a piece of paper in front of them. They've not done ear training, and they're not playing emotionally as much. They try.
Yeah.
There's some there's some out there that do, but it's mostly a display of technical skills. You know, John Laporta was a great jazz saxophone player, and he taught at Berklee School of Music for a lot of years. And back in the 40s, he sat in with Bird and he played with Charlie Mingus's band and all this stuff. And when I was in a youth band, when I was 18 years old, at the first year of the Stan Kenton summer stage band camps, they were called. They didn't use the word jazz because oh no, we don't want to use the word jazz here, you know, and piss off all of the religious people, you know. But the thing about it was that the John Laporta was teaching at Berklee, and there was a student that wanted to study with him, but he was an undergrad, and you had to be you had to qualify to be with John. He was one of the upper teachers. So anyway, the kid did a recital, and he invited John to come. And so when John walked in the room while the kid was playing, the kid went, "Oh, John's here!" And so he started going, "Ooh, ooh," and he playing all of his unloading the whole load of hay. You know, he started playing all this technical stuff, you know, and to try to impress John. And after the concert, John went up to him, and this is a true story because I heard it as a rumor, and I asked John, and he said, yes, it did happen. So afterwards, John goes up to the kid and says, about your playing, he said, there's good news and bad news. He said, the good news is you've got an awful lot of technique. He said, the bad news is you've got an awful lot of technique. You know? And I mean, that's true with a lot of, you know, that's not what music is all about. If you go back and study the origins of music, where it came from, it was an ancient form of prayer and chanting.
Yeah.
You know? Well, this is where it came from. It wasn't for entertainment or for gigs or anything like that, you know, but the music industry has become an industry, and it's lost its meaning. You know, sometimes when you find the best music, you go up in the Appalachian Hills and you find a bunch of good old boys sitting around a campfire with a jug of wine or something, and they're just playing and they're hooting and hollering. They're having a great time. They're having a great time. They may not be the greatest guitar or banjo player on the planet, but they're not trying to be. They're just trying to have experience the joy of being creative, you know? And like, that's the whole thing with me is, you know, I spent a lot of years on the road playing with all those bands, and I really loved it. And I learned a hell of a lot, I have to say. I have no regrets, you know, but there got to be a point when I was doing studio work where you can do, like, I was averaging, you know, 15 sessions a week even, you know, probably.
Wow.
And that's when it was really busy back there. I was doing 3 sessions a day, easy, you know, and trying to run out after the 3rd or 4th session to a club and sit in with and play for $30 with Art Pepper's group or something like that, you know. But the thing was that when you're doing studio work, you sit there all day long and you play, you know, you put horns on rock and roll records, or you put movie soundtracks or jingles for Burger King or something, you know.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you may have earned a lot of money, but the government takes a high percentage of it in tax. The union takes the tax on work dues and stuff like that. And you work your butt off playing garbage. At the end of the day, you think, what did I play? Nothing of any value. Nothing I really want to come home and say, wow, you wouldn't believe all the beautiful stuff I played today. Every once in a while, there's a movie soundtrack or something where it's, you know, Jerry Goldsmith and some of these guys, John Williams, they're really good writers, you know, the writing is good, but you know, you sit there and you're not playing that much. You don't play a piece that's 20 minutes long or you know, you play in television, you play bumpers, which are like 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds, scene changes, you know, cup mute, one note, you know,
Yeah.
and well, it gets boring after a while. And music as a when music is just a job,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a very good job, you know.
Yeah.
That's all it means to guys. And I know a lot of musicians I worked with in the studios in LA that didn't even care for music. They were only playing it because they could make money at it, you know.
Yeah.
And I'd say to a guitar player, I say, "You're going to go out and hear so and so is playing in the club." "Oh no, I hate jazz. I don't care about, you know. I mean,
Wow.
why do you play? Why do you play the guitar?" He says, "For the money." I'm going, "God, that's terrible, you know."
Well, there's other ways to earn money, right?
Well,
Yeah.
but you know, that's where my head's at. And I retired from the studios in 1982, and I just didn't want to do anything with it anymore.
Yeah.
I got into teaching, as I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
Very early. I didn't teach all of the years because I was busy learning. But in 1968, I started getting really busy as a teacher, you know, and people started asking me, you know, how did you do this and how you do that? And Buddy Rich, and they heard me play on different albums and stuff, and they'd say, "Man, how do you have those chops?" Or
Yeah.
whatever. And you know, and so I started teaching, and I've been teaching pretty solid ever since 1968. The turning point for me as a teacher, I would say, really happened in 1974. I was doing a festival up in Canada, and Maynard was there with his band, and you know I'd been on his band 2 times before, so I was just chatting with him backstage, and you know he was warming up and playing all of these ridiculous things up to the high register, and I said to him, you know, I said, we hear rumors that you went to India and some guy showed you some magical breath or something that gives you these chops. And he reached in his case, and this is something about like timing when it's always just right. He reached in his case and pulled out a little book called The Science of Breath, written by a guy by the name of Yogi Rama Tridaka, who it's not really his name. It was a guy, Charles something or other
Oh,
from Chicago, you know. But anyway, it was a yoga breathing book. And Maynard gave me the book, you know. He says, "I got many copies at home, so you can keep it." So I started reading the book, and then Bud Brisbois showed me how to use it on the trumpet. And it turned my chops completely around. And all of a sudden, where I had been using an awful lot of stress and cutting my chops and getting hernias and
no.
headaches and all of that, all of a sudden that started to make, I started to correct that. And you know, Roger Ingram was the second student that I taught it to. He was 14 years old. And the rest is history with that. And, you know, and guys that have studied with me, Wayne Bergeron, Eric Miyashiro, then you know, the list goes on and on worldwide. You know, I started teaching that yoga breath, which I called the wedge because it's kind of like a
Yeah.
way you use the abdominal muscles. But that turned my whole teaching into the fact that I realized there's a science underlying the human body, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, anatomy and physiology came into the picture. So one of my students was a doctor. And as a matter of fact, he was the head of the medical school at the University of Arizona in Tucson.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
His name was David Blask.
Hmm.
And he's a cancer research specialist he's at Tulane University in New Orleans. He's a brilliant uh, doctor, but he's also he plays the hell out of the trumpet. He's a good lead trumpet player and a good jazz soloist, you know. But his calling was in medicine. But I asked him, I said, "How does this respiratory system work?" So he started forcing me to read books on anatomy. And next thing I knew what a muscle was. I knew how it worked. I knew what the ribs were. I knew what a diaphragm was. I knew how the respiratory system functioned. And then since then, I, you know, right at 74, right when I started, got that breathing book, and within probably 6 weeks after that, Yamaha signed me up to start designing horns for them. And so I've been with Yamaha since 1974 also. And I started becoming a science teacher, you know. I'm teaching like, you know, anatomy, physiology. I teach people how muscles work, how they develop, how they, if they get damaged, how to repair them, things like that. And what I've discovered, you know, since 1974, that's a few years ago. You know, I mean, if you can look here on my bookshelves around here, there's all kinds of books on neuroscience and anatomy and physiology and you know, all kinds of stuff like physical training for dummies, stuff like that, or whatever, you know. But the thing about it is, I'm like a science teacher, and I get results because I teach truth, fact, rather. My whole game is that I realized that I'm not trying to invalidate people, but you know, I would say the majority of the people that teach the trumpet really don't know how it works. They don't know how the body works. They just put them in the Arvin book or the Clark studies, and they play until they don't miss enough notes, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. But when a kid needs help with something, they don't always give them the best answer to it. You know, the kid might say like, oh, I have no endurance, and they say, oh, you need to do about 2 hours of long tones every day. And I can prove to you scientifically that that's not going to strengthen your muscles. You know, if you do long tones, there is a way to do it that could help the strength. But for the most part, you use long tones to work on your sound. And the sound quality comes from understanding getting the muscles prepped properly so that they can produce sound, and playing on the, you know, I mean, if you're trying to play lead trumpet on a 1C mouthpiece, you're in trouble. You're going to end up in a hernia ward with that. It's like trying to hit a home run with a cucumber. You ain't going to get a hit. You know?
Hey, Bobby, let me press pause for a second. For those of you who are on Zoom right now and, you know, who want the mic to be turned on and for your face to be seen, if I turn on everybody's mic, it's going to be pandemonium. So please ask your question for Bobby in the comment question, and then Bobby will sure get your questions. And also, Bobby, I want a lot of people are asking, Bobby, your approach to the just to almost, I don't want to say effortless playing, but to making I mean, the way you just, it looks like you play effortlessly and you can do it all day long. Like how did you develop that approach? I'm getting tons of questions about that.
Well, the thing about it, first of all, there's no such thing as effortless.
Okay.
You know? I mean, even if you pick up a pencil and sign your name, that takes an effort, you know.
Yeah.
But you have to use the name of the game is efficiency. And the definition of efficiency is getting the most amount of product out of the least amount of work, you know. And what I've observed in all the years of teaching is that the majority of the people that try to play the horn work too hard on it because they don't understand how to make it work properly. Let me take a drink of water.
Go ahead.
I had an email with one of my students. I sent him an email this morning, and he's going through some changes and stuff he's trying to develop. He's not a pro player, but he's looking to play on some local bands, you know, back on the East Coast and so forth. And he's trying to put his chops together. And he said to me, like paraphrase, I don't know exactly the words he used, but he says, I feel like I'm overblowing the horn. And this is the most common problem with players, is that they don't understand like the physics. Like, and so I sent him an email, and here's one thing that you have to understand in order to play the trumpet well. The trumpet is nothing really more than an amplifier. You know, this thing here is the trumpet more so. Because if you can't play properly on the mouthpiece, you're not going to work Carnegie Hall on a mouthpiece, you know, you're not. But and nobody wants to hear that. But the point being that tone production occurs with the facial embouchure and the muscles in the face and how you do here. So if you put a mouthpiece up to your chops and you go, the trumpet's going to amplify that. So you're going to get like this horrible sound on the instrument, you know. But if you can go, well, the trumpet's going to go, oh, louder, you know, and it'll produce a sound. So the whole idea is that a lot of people don't understand, they don't do enough work on the mouthpiece and the facial muscles that are and they don't understand how that has to happen. The air has to go through an aperture. And a lot of people talk about buzzing, you know, like that. That's a good exercise, but it's like a swimmer doing sit-ups. He doesn't jump in the pool and do sit-ups in the water. He'll sink right to the bottom of the pool, you know? And if you try to buzz like that on the trumpet, you're going to sound like a kazoo at best. Because, you know, like here, look, I'll show you. Here's a good example. I just. Now, if that's how you want to sound, that's the way to do it, you know, but that's not a trumpet sound. So you have to drop the jaw and open up an aperture. And the aperture is an old French word. It means an opening. They use it on a camera, like for the lens, you know, and to let an amount of light in so that it exposes a picture. So if you don't open up the aperture by dropping the jaw, your airstream is not going to set up vibrations. So like you got a top lip and a bottom lip going like this. When they're vibrating like that, they're vibrating. When they're touching like this, they're going, but there's no air. Watch. Here's this. Look at the Kleenex. Watch. Well, Kleenex is not moving. There's not enough air to even budge that Kleenex that's only 2 inches from my mouth. But if I go like this, like I'm spitting a piece of rice across the room, and so you take the trumpet mouthpiece and you go, but if I go, you see, that's like C-spot run of playing the trumpet right there. You know, and how many people don't understand that?
Well, I mean, I think, Bobby, if it's okay, I mean, I just don't want to. I want to use my time as well. I mean, I'm eating all this up. You're like, I view you as a library, and I get to ask a book a question, you know. And so, I have a bunch of questions. Is it okay if we get to some of the questions? Is it cool?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay. This is from Cameron Headley. He says, Mr. Shew, I seem to have a lot of reoccurring embouchure problems. I think it may be due to my odd teeth and being unable to find a flat platform to play on. Lately, my biggest problem has been the upper register rolling in the top of my teeth, taking everything out of alignment. Is because there's an air pocket right above my lip that I can't seem to get rid of. I hope this makes sense.
There's a lot of things in that question, and I hope I heard them all, because I couldn't really make out everything you were saying. But first and foremost, the teeth are an important issue to some degree. to the degree that you have to have perfect cosmetic teeth, no, you don't. You know, I have crooked teeth down here. You know, that's a cap. My teeth will look like a bag of Southwest peanuts. But the point being, and I know lots of great players, like Al Porcino's teeth were crooked like mine, kind of, you know. A lot of great players, their teeth are not perfect. I knew a great trumpet player who played like with Les Brown's band and all that, and his dentist one time convinced him he should have his teeth all recapped and made cosmetically perfect, and he did that, and like an idiot, and he couldn't play. He lost his chops, and he got so depressed over it, he ended up taking his own life. I mean, it was so sad. And he
Wow.
was a hell of a trumpet player. But you don't have to go out and get cosmetically perfect teeth. But what you have to look for is overbites and things like that, where a person's top teeth are overbite like that. It's you're moving the jaw down here to control the airstream. And here's another issue that a lot of teachers don't even know about. And it's not an option. A lot of people say, oh, it's just a method. It's not a method. It's part of the science. It's air pivoting. And air pivoting is changing the direction of the air inside the cup when you play. The high register is the air is going up into the like if this is a cup, when you play the low register and go up to the high register, your air has to change direction. But if you have an overbite and you try to push your jaw forward that much to push the air up this way, well, you can get problems with your jaw back here. So it's called temporomandibular joint. And
Yeah.
so people with an overbite, they can't do the, if I can play and I'm not moving the horn, I'm doing it all with my jaw, right?
Right.
But somebody who has an overbite can't do that. So they have to move the horn down, right? So what I do is internal pivoting. That's not moving the horn at all.
Right.
But external pivoting is like this. And you see people who have an overbite, and a teacher has to be aware enough of that to look at a kid that's starting to play and see if he's got a bite problem. And like a lot of band directors say, get those horns up in the air. Well, if a guy's got an overbite, the only way you can get the horn up in the air, he's got to push his head back like this. Now he's going to choke in his throat and hit. There's a pocket of nerves at the base of the skull called a reticular formation. And when you pinch back like this, you can cause some serious headaches and even go into some spinal issues, and create numbness in the body. So a teacher has the responsibility to understand the body, and more so. And this way you can help a student do that, you see. So, I mean, now with this kid that's asked easy question, first and foremost, one of the best ways to solve this embouchure situation is to leave the horn in the case and take the mouthpiece and buzz on the mouthpiece until you can, if you have to move it up and down to get notes, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But the guy's got to understand the air pivoting. And Costello wrote a book on this in 1932,
Yeah.
the Costello method. It's pretty much out of print, but anybody, it's a very small little pamphlet. Anybody that wants it, just send me an email. I'll email them the booklet in PDF.
Awesome.
But so
Yeah.
that's one thing to try to answer this kid's question. His upper register, if he doesn't know how to control his airstream inside of the cup, he's not going to get the upper register. I mean, Doc Severinsen took a lesson with me about 2.5 years ago, and I was showing him about the air pivoting, and he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Come on, you're doing it, Doc." He says, "I don't even know what you're talking about." And I said, "Well, you studied with Benny Baker, right?" He says, "Yeah, but Benny never said anything about that." And I said, "Well, he probably didn't say anything because you're already doing it correctly,
Yeah.
But Doc is like such a brilliant trumpet player, my God, But a lot of guys don't know what they're doing. A lot of people develop this instinctive thing about pointing the airstream. And then a teacher will come along and tell you that all your air has to go into the throat, straight into the throat. It's totally not true scientifically, and you can prove it scientifically. It doesn't work. You have to change the direction of the air in the cup. And I could go into I'm not going to go into a whole lecture on the science of what goes on inside the cup, but there are scientific issues going on that are part of acoustical physics, and I'm not a physicist, but I've certainly read a whole lot of books about
Right.
physics and about tone production and stuff. I know exactly what makes the sound produced on a trumpet. And so when I'm teaching, when I have a kid come to me, most often I'm trying to make corrections about information that they've been given that's not true at all. There's so much, I'm trying to separate fact from opinion. And I don't mind if people have opinions, if you think, you know, like apple pie is better than cherry pie, that's an opinion, but we're not going to burn down the cherry pie factories just because you prefer apple pie, you know. But when a teacher is trying to show a kid how to play an instrument and he doesn't know how it all works, oh, and
Yeah.
if you stop and look at the millions and millions of trumpet owners, I'd say trumpet owners in the world, uh, then you realize how few can really play well. There's a lot of mediocre players, and there's some very poor players around the world. And in most cases, I don't think people are that stupid. I think they just are sometimes given the wrong information.
Yeah.
But what do I know?
No, you're Bobby. You're, like I said, you're a guru's guru, and I'm gonna ask two questions at the same time, but hopefully answer one. Bobby, it's you were telling me that you are taking private students, and that you contact Bobby directly through his website. Also, I got a question, and this is a question I had as well, Bobby. Bobby, we're getting a lot of people in academia right now that just went through the motions. Like when I was going through school, the way I picked a teacher was his background as a player, and his
Right.
experience as a player. Now we get a lot of teachers just went from their bachelor's to their doctorate without without the experience. So
Exactly.
Carl asked, there's a lot of there aren't a lot of great teachers. Who would you recommend as teachers to people now, other than yourself?
Well, me, first of all.
Yeah, that's it. Other than yourself.
And one of the things that I have tried to insist upon, I don't put to point a gun at anybody's head,
Yeah.
but I would say this to you, that when I have a student, I try to teach them how to teach, because I don't teach anybody to play, and no teacher teaches anybody how to play. If they think they do, they're full of it, you know, and they're up that famous creek without a paddle.
Yeah.
Point being that what we do is we give understanding of the tools that a student has so he can go in his practice room and teach himself how to play the way he wants to play. You know, in this day and age, kids coming up through school, in college, they probably don't know exactly what their career is going to be. It's a lot of questions, and they're going to get out of college and want to go out and play. Well, where are the gigs? Well, right now with the pandemic, I mean, there's nothing. But prior to the pandemic, or after it ends off and we get back to some normalcy, the types of gigs that a student is going to probably get, he's not going to come out of college with a master's degree and be a top player in New York studios or LA or something like that. He's going to work his way through cruise ships and things, theme parks, playing in a trumpet fanfare thing at Disneyland or something.
Right.
You got to work your way into the system, and the thing about it is, it's true, a doctor's degree in music is useless. The only thing it's good for is it gets you a college job, but you still might be one of those guys I'm talking about that may not be a good teacher. Just because you can play the trumpet doesn't mean you can teach anybody. You may not have the right tools that I'm talking about. Maybe you don't know about embouchure development. You don't know about dental things. You don't know about muscles, anatomy, physiology. You don't know about the air pivoting. You don't know anything about the physics of airflow. Man. And I can tell you, I've taught in I don't like to teach in universities because usually the dean that's above all of us teachers has had no career. He's never played a gig in his life, probably, or maybe not even a wedding or something. Maybe he's played in a concert band, a local, a local community band or something. He does that, and he sits there and plays like John Kakovich charts, or, country gardens or some stuff. But the point being that a teacher who has had no real experience on the bandstand and so forth is not, he's not given the experience to the student. I had a thought many years ago, because I was teaching at USC when I lived in LA. I taught at Cal State Northridge for 23 years, and I taught at USC simultaneously for 11 years. And plus, I've been around all over the world teaching in conservatories and Hochschuls all through Germany and Japan and all kind of places, But the thing about it is, I see an awful lot of teachers that have never really played, and they can't play, some of them, if they pick up the instrument, it's like, oh my God, put that back in the case right away, But here's the thing, I had thought years ago that it would be a good idea if a student came to college, and even after they got out of high school, it would be a good idea if they did gigs for a year before they got in college. You just would go out and work somewhere, do something, play on a salsa band or a rock band, or do something, play, and then go to school. And then you go to school for 2 years, freshman and sophomore. Then you can't go to school. You have to take another year and go out and play, do cruise ships or theme parks or something. And then you can come back and be a junior and a senior, and you can get your bachelor's, and then you can do, I think even after you do a BMA, you should go out and do another year and then come back and do your MA, the master's. There should be a balance between the studying and the actual application of the music in a practical sense. That way, if the guy does become, gets a doctorate and gets a job at, East Podunk University or something like that, he's more equipped to help the students guide themselves. I've written a lot of articles about, like, you are your own best teacher, for instance, and I don't want teachers, I don't think that teachers who set themselves up in a authoritarian position to where the student relies upon the teacher, I think that's criminal. I think we have to teach the student to rely upon himself, the self-teaching thing, self-realization, Yogananda, it's like, for a student that takes a 1 hour lesson with me and goes home, and he may not, even if he takes a lesson 1 week later, he's going to practice how many hours? Maybe 20, 30 hours compared to the 1 hour he has with me. He's going to have to know how to teach himself, because he's going to be by himself in that room. He's got to know what he's doing. I write articles about how to practice. A lot of people go in the practice room, as I said earlier, and all they do is pound away and try to play some concerto or something without missing a note in it, But the truth is, when you're playing a musical instrument, you're going to miss notes. And it's not a crime. When you miss a note, there's a reason for it. It's either a physical reason, it's in your breathing, it's in your embouchure development, your setting, mouthpiece setting, maybe you're playing on the wrong mouthpiece, or it can be mental. When you get like fear going on with you, it makes you withdraw, and you're going to start messing up when you play because you're afraid of it, you're withdrawing and so forth. And when a person is in a practice room and they start missing a lot, then they get pissed off and they start inventing 4-letter words And the next thing you know, they're in a bad frame of mind, and you can't learn to play when you're in that state of mind, and so you're not even a good teacher for yourself, and that's I think the whole system is really wrong, to be honest with you. I mean, I just think we all need to step back and take a much wiser look, much more responsible look at what education could be, in general, not only in music, but it's pretty bad in most things, I always say, why do you have to know that Pierre is the capital of South Dakota? You're not going to go there.
I got
But
another question, Bobby, from
okay,
Lorenzo. He says, can you tell us about the tongue position via phonetic syllables?
well, yes, and there's an awful lot made of tongue position, but the tongue and the jaw are connected, and that's the first thing you have to know. Is so when you when we speak, you watch as I'm changing the vowel sounds in my mouth. You can see my jaw moving as the tongue and the jaw move. So, like a lot in classical training for trumpet, you use ta, te, ti, ta, ya, ya, ta, ya, 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 ya. And it's done mostly with like da, ya, 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 ya. The tongue, like the front of the tongue, like a like a seal or something up there. But the point being that when you say, if you go ta, watch the aperture, it goes ta, and it reduces the size of the aperture. One of the biggest problems with most brass players, especially trumpet players, is that they play too tight in here. They pinch up their chops too tight. So when you use the phonetics in playing, you're closing up or you're reducing the size of the aperture too much. So for instance, if you put your tongue, watch this, ta, you can see the jaw move up. Now watch, ta, the jaw doesn't move. And so the back of the tongue goes up instead of the front. Ta, well, you can only go so far because the back of the tongue is finished. Then you come to the middle of the tongue. And then eventually, by the time you get up above high C around E flat F, you're probably going to be pronouncing T, or, the E syllable. But, and that's okay, because by the time you get up there, your aperture is changing size based on two things: the register that you're in and the dynamic that you're playing. So here's dynamic: loud, mezzo forte, soft, low register, middle register, high register. Simple. Shouldn't be a simple. So now tongue position ties in with phonetics. The person who wants to play like a lead trumpet, if he goes ta, he's going to get like thin, squeaky little notes up there because his aperture is small. The size of the aperture determines the size of the note to some degree, the slot. You dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you can, if you close the aperture down, you're going to get a note that big around. But if you open up the aperture, you go ta, you're going to get but if you go ta, you're going to get this little squeaky mouse sound up there at the top. It's very simple, but there's times and places when you have to learn to control the aperture. That's what playing the trumpet's all about. You're not controlling the aperture, you're not controlling your airstream, you're not controlling the quality of the sound. And if your aperture's out of control, if it's all too tight and pinchy and squeezing and pressing, I call it the 3 P's: pinch, press, and pray. And if you're an atheist, you only get 2 of them. And the thing about it is that if you are pinching and squeezing and mashing and all up in there, it affects, first and foremost, your quality of your sound. It'll affect your intonation. It'll affect your endurance. It'll affect everything you do on the horn. And you have got to learn how the aperture and that size of that aperture affects your quality of sound, your dynamics, and your register. And like when you're playing in the upper register, you don't want an aperture this big because it's gonna change. It's the airspeed's not gonna be there.
Yeah.
It's all about airspeed, man.
So, Bobby, I'm going to ask this question, and I've always wanted to ask you this. Bobby, you talk about projection. I think I got 14 questions about projection. Can you tell us how you talk, how your ideas on projection?
Well, it's funny because if you ask 10 people what their concept of projection would be, you'd get 10 different answers probably. It depends. Projection is moving your sound outward, obviously. That's what that basically means. So it depends on the situation, because if you're playing in a group like Tower of Power or any kind of a rock band, you're dealing with the acoustical properties of the electronics of guitars and electric bass, the loud drums. That most rock and roll music is played very loud, not pianissimo. You're not going to hear like Tower of Power playing like soft, delicate stuff. I mean, they take the walls out. And as do most of the rock bands. So you play in a rock band or in a salsa band, which is also another one, which is quite loud usually. They have occasionally some boleros and a few things like that, which are a little lighter, but for the most part, you've got the conguero, the bongo, the clave, everything else. And there's a lot of sound up there. Your sound has to cut through all of that. So in that kind of a situation, you're probably going to want, and you're going to pick a mouthpiece that's going to have a brighter sound, that's more focused, like probably won't open up like this, like a classical guy would want. You're going to want to get more something like straight ahead, like projecting that way. And so, you're going to control the aperture with regard to the mouthpiece you play. The mouthpiece that you select has a great deal to do with what the aperture has to do. If the mouthpiece is too big, you have to compensate for it by pinching a lot to get the airspeed back up. But if you go to a shallower mouthpiece, you have to open up the aperture. You can't play on a shallow mouthpiece with a small aperture. You're going to be in trouble. If you get anything at all, you're going to sound really thin and laser-like. And plus, what happens is there's a thing called a slot, which is a centered note. And it means that all of the overtones are in it, So the overtones are there for a pianissimo, mezzo forte, and fortissimo. So they all change. When you have to pinch, you reduce the size of the slot, and therefore it's harder to be accurate on it because it's so small, and you can go, and the next partial is right next door to it. So you can crack a lot of notes when your aperture is too small for things. And where people use the wrong mouthpiece quite often, they'll want to, teachers will say, oh, get the biggest mouthpiece you can play. Well, it's the opposite. Alan Vizzuti and I did a clinic together in, where was it? San Antonio, I think it was, or someplace, at the Texas Bandmaster, I think. And the two of us, they put us up together on the stage. And so we thought, well, okay, what are we going to do here? And I told Alan, well, why don't you talk for a little while and then I'll talk for a little while. And so Alan started off and he said, most people play on mouthpieces, it's too big. And I went, oh, that's exactly what I was going to say, And it's true that they start on a 7C, then they move them to a 3C, and then a 1.5 or a 1.25. See, and most people are playing on stuff that's like you can wash your laundry in it, It's like stuff that's like a bird bath,
Yeah.
And you need mouthpieces are we call them mouthpieces because they fit on our mouth, but in science, they are a transducer. And trans means across, and deuce means duct. It's a tube that connects your airstream, here, sound production, to the mouthpiece, which therefore goes to the trumpet. It's the connection. And that's why it takes me back to what I was saying earlier. It's very important to sit and do mouthpiece stuff, you know? Like, let me show you something that I do. I don't get a chance to practice like I used to, because I'm kind of retired now and I'm not going to be going on the road playing gigs. I mean, I might do something if it's the right situation and easy to do, but I'm not really looking forward to traveling the world like I did for 61 years. But here's a mouthpiece buzzing drill. Watch. Okay, I'm just making sure it's centered in the lower middle register, you know? Now watch. All right, well, that's a good exercise for me. It assures me that I can play the upper register. But if I do this, and I pinch prematurely, I got no upper register. So people who are trying to develop their embouchure setting and their function of tone production, they need to sometimes just leave the trumpet in the case and spend some time on the mouthpiece, you know? And you can really, I tell students, I say, you know what's wrong with your practicing? You can't play on the mouthpiece right. You're getting a crappy sound on the mouthpiece. The trumpet's just going to make that louder. That's all it does is amplify what you do on the mouthpiece. So I say, take the mouthpiece and go out in the city park and sit on a bench and buzz to the birds and the rabbits and throw them some bread and stuff like that. But just work on the mouthpiece until you can straighten a little of that out and then put the trumpet on there, you know?
Right. I got a question from Kit Dello, and he says, I'm currently trying to extend my range, but also relieve throat tension. What exercises would you recommend for joining the low register with the high register, as well as aiming for the top notes?
Well, the whole thing is aperture control, as I've talked about. I just explained that whole thing. The low register is the air going into the bottom of your cup. Let me just show you something here. This is, we talked about air pivoting a little earlier, you know. I'm going to show you a page out of my, this is, wait a minute, oops, I dropped it. Clumsy fingers. This is called my basic study guide for trumpet.
Oh, wow.
Okay, it's not really published. It kind of is published, but I don't have it really out on the market. But here's the sheet about air pivots. Okay, so if you look at that low C, that big thick black dot is where the air is going, like that.
Yeah.
And as you go up the register up to high C, you see how the dot moves?
Yeah.
And this, one of my students did this, so don't take it literally, but the airstream has to change and go like this as you're going up. It has to. It's not an option. It's a part of acoustical science. It's called fluid dynamics in physics, and it has to. You can't play without it. You know, I showed it to Doc Serens and he went, I'll be damned, you know. Some cowboy kid shows me what I've been doing for 75 years.
Bobby?
But, you know, the thing about it is a lot of people, all of these questions, you know, that people are asking, they're not unusual questions, because I have seen so many questions come my way as a teacher that are if they just had the right data, they wouldn't be asking those questions. If they really understood the mechanics of playing, I sent you a thing called the 4 fundamentals of troubleshooting, right?
Yeah. Bobby,
It,
can I share that with everybody? Is that cool if I share that?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Those 4 fundamentals are there for everybody playing a brass instrument, whether it's a tuba or a French horn or cornet or I don't care what, euphonium or what. But if it's a cup mouthpiece, and you could actually take those 4 fundamentals and change some words in there and apply it to a woodwind player too. You know, now I know some people who play keyboards and drums and guitar, and they change the wording around and it make it work for their instrument as well. You know, so a person like, like in our case, we have the feeling of the lips is the first thing. That's doing a proper warm up. Well, the warm up that I use is based on the science of physiology and anatomy. Okay, the first 2 steps are fluttering, which is flushing blood into the muscles because they need blood. Why? Because they have oxygen and glycogen, which is blood sugar. And without those 2 things, your muscles are not going to function. It's an athletic kind of thing. Athletes do it. They warm up, they shake their things, they wiggle their arms or their legs before they run. Why don't we do the same thing? You can't, the muscle won't function if it doesn't have oxygen and blood sugar in it, period. So then you do that. And then you have like lip buzzing, which is, and that's how you strengthen this corners out here. Because when you put your finger there, you can feel this thing going like that. You dig?
Yeah.
So that's how you play. It's from here. The lips are not, there's no muscle in the lips. The muscle is around the lips out here, but there's no muscle in the lips. Okay. The muscles are out here in the face. Okay. So we got to get the muscles full of blood. Now, guys who flutter, they usually do it for the lips. And the reason we talk about the feeling of the lips is because that's what you can feel. You can't really squeeze your cheek together and feel it. It's not, the sensitivity is not there. But so anyway, fluttering, lip buzzing, and then mouthpiece buzzing. And so then you do the right things on the mouthpiece and set up some glissandos and some scales and some little things. And then you put the trumpet on there and you do the same thing on the trumpet. Your warm up is done. And when you get good at it, it's about 4, 5, 6 minutes. It's not this 1 hour warm up. I know people that warm up for 2 hours and stuff. They're so exhausted at the end of the warm up, they can't even play. I've had students come up for a lesson, and when I was living in LA, they would be students at Long Beach State, and Long Beach is about an hour from where I used to live in LA. And so they'd be, they'd be in the car all the way up there. And they they would come to the lesson and I'd say, let's play. And they'd say, well, I'm not warmed up. And I'd say, well, damn, you were in the car for an hour. Why didn't you warm up in the car? You can flutter and lip buzz, and you can even mouthpiece buzz in the car. You don't want to be playing the trumpet while you're driving, but I mean, you can do flutter, lip buzz, and mouthpiece buzzing in the car. And you get to the lesson, you're warmed up, you're ready to play. Take the horn out, stick it up there and play. And so this guy, he would say, I need to warm up. And so I'm sitting there waiting, and he's paying me to watch him warm up. He's got to do 45 minutes of stupid pedal notes and long tones and arpeggios and scales. And God, I'm thinking, what the hell are you doing? You're gonna drive yourself nuts here with that, And so anyway, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question right, but
Well, I mean, Bobby, everyone's eating this up, and everyone. Here is from I have a question, Bobby. How does a younger professional trumpet player learn to play lead trumpet stylistically acute?
How does what? A young trumpet player do what?
How does a young professional trumpet player learn to play lead trumpet stylistically acute?
Acute?
I think he meant to say accurate.
Oh yeah, okay. I was going to say acute. Acute. Oh, very cute. Yeah.
Bobby.
Well, first of all, you have to listen. Anything in music, if you don't listen and you don't have the references to follow. If you don't listen to people play jazz trumpet, you're not going to learn to be a jazz trumpet player. So there's a kid by the name of Jason Levi who went to, I think, North Texas State,
Yep.
and he lives in Las Vegas now, and he's one of the players out there on the strip and all that. But he did a book. It's called First Trumpet or something like that, I think.
Yeah, it's a great book.
And I wrote the preface for the book, and it's about mostly about the three most important lead trumpet players in my opinion. Okay, this is my opinion. Somebody else might have another opinion, but I think if you go back through the history of big band lead trumpet playing, there's three guys that stand out really exceptionally. The first one is Snooky Young, and Snooky developed a lot of his stylistic playing back in the Fletcher Henderson band back in the late 30s, 37, 38, back in that period, Snooky then eventually ended up on the Basie band, and Snooky, based on Basie's desires, Snooky pretty much designed the way of playing Count Basie style of lead trumpet playing. It's a style. It's a do 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 lead up dip that do do. Okay, it's a style. You listen to Basie's band. It's crisp. It's got certain characteristics to it. So Snooky, like that, man. I mean, and I had the good fortune to stand next to Snooky for years out in LA on Louis Belton's band, on Bill Berry's band, on the Juggernaut, Nat Pierce's Juggernaut band. And Snooky lived about 3 blocks from me in Van Nuys. So we used to see each other in the grocery store. We hung a lot, man. Snooky I love that man. And he was, boy, I learned so much from standing next to him, But so the second one is Al Porcino. And Al Porcino was like, he came onto the scene back in the 40s with the Woody Herman band and some of those, and Charlie Barnett and whatever. But Al made he played on the Canton band on some of the early 50s things, and then Al's biggest mark, recording wise, was the Terry Gibbs band. The Terry Gibbs big band, the ones recorded live at the Summit and some of those things, Oh man, the Al is playing on there is like different than the Snooky, but it's a little more elongated, but it's got such a feel to it, And when you put Al Pacino with Mel Lewis and Buddy Clark on bass, boy, that swings like you can't believe. Got a different kind of swing feel than the Basie one. Okay, so Al needs to be checked out completely. Third is Conrad Gazzo. And Gazzo was the guy that played lead on most of the Billy May albums and the Nelson Riddle, Sinatra things and all that. Much more elongated playing, And the interesting thing about these things, all of those guys were kind of jazz players, but not beboppers. Snooky was kind of an older plunger, kind of bluesy, kind of Bubba Miley kind of a soloist. He could play some great solos, but it was not Clifford Brown type thing, Kenny Dorham, It wasn't bebop. It was just swings kind of, but he knew how to play that pocket. Al Pacino could play sort of like a little bit kind of jet solos, but not really, he wasn't a bebopper either. He was into the music and listened to Bird and Dizzy and all those cats, but he wasn't that kind of a jazz player. And Conrad Gazzo played a little bit more like a kind of a popish kind of a jazz solos, you know, not a great bebopper either. But all of them had a style to make the band swing. And if you're going to be a lead player, you need to listen to those three guys. And if you see, in playing is an input output situation. And if you don't put stuff in, you got no references. If you want to be a jazz musician, you got to sit down and you got to start with Louis Armstrong, and you got to listen to Bix, and you got to listen to Bunny Berrigan and Roy Eldridge and Dizzy Gillespie, and you got to come through them all. You know, Miles, early Miles, Freddie Hubbard, you know, Clifford Brown. You got to get them all in there and see what it's all about. That's what jazz is all about. And when if you're trying to be a lead trumpet player, a lot of guys think it's just having high chops, but it's not. It's, you know, like back on the Kenton band, for instance, when people like Al Pacino was playing lead, you'd have Maynard Ferguson playing the fifth book. And if they needed the high thing, well, it was Maynard did it from fifth chair. It wasn't like, you know, Al Pacino. Al could play up to G's and so forth, but Al wasn't like a double C player, you know. Neither was Conrad Gazzo, and neither really was Snooky. It wasn't the double C that determined them, it was their feel. And so the only way you're going to get that feel is by listening, you know.
Yeah.
So that answers that. And you got to sit and practice it. There's a guy who he's not a student of mine. His name is James Blackwell.
Oh yeah.
And he lives back in Pennsylvania now, but he was one of the top players in the studios in LA for a while. And he just put out a book of the lead trumpet parts for the Cherry Gibbs Big Band. Are you familiar with that book?
Yeah, you know, and he's an advocate of, he doesn't play above forte. You know, he's an advocate for that. If you read his book, he doesn't play anything past forte, you know, and he has a very, very systematic approach. It's a great book. It really is.
Yeah, I just bought it from him actually, but because I played lead on Terry Gibbs Band for 32 years.
Oh, wow.
And I played almost every one of those charts. And one of my students in Kansas bought the book, and he told me about it. And I said, I got to get it, you know, see if I can use it for my students. That's a good book. And you know Fred Forney? You must know Fred.
I know Fred very well.
Well, Fred's got that book on first trumpet parts. That's very good too, you know.
Yeah. Bobby, this is probably the most asked question. What do you tell someone that says, Bobby, I want to play like you. I want to do what you do?
I tell them, you're crazy. Play like you. Don't play like me. You know, you know who Greg Gisbert is, of course.
Yes, sir.
One of my most profound students ever. And one of the absolutely most unbelievable trumpet players on the planet. You know, this guy, he can play jazz as good as anybody, play lead as good as anybody, play the upper register as good as anybody, you know. He moved back into the Denver area because of the pandemic, and it's too expensive to live in New York, especially if you're not working, you know.
Yeah.
But Greg, when he was very young, he was 15 when he started studying with me. And I used to play this club called the El Chapultepec in Denver. And my wife and daughter were in the club one time when I was playing, and I invited Greg to come sit in with me, you know. And my daughter was, what, I don't know, she was 7 or 8 years old then, maybe, you know. And they were in the first booth by the bandstand, you know. And so I would play a solo on a tune, and then Greg would play a solo on a tune. And Greg had listened to me so much that he played all of my licks. he was playing my shit, and I'm listening to him. I'm going, that's mine, And my daughter, she went, Dad, psst. And I leaned over to her and I said, what? She said, he sounds exactly like you. I said, I know.
Wow.
Greg could actually copy my solos to a T, and I just kept saying, one of me is enough. You got to have one of the most beautiful things about music in any category, whether it's country and Western or polka music of Bavaria, find your own voice, and especially when you get into the creative music like improvisation, we're all influenced by everybody from Louis Armstrong and all of those I listed, up through Clifford and Kenny Dorham and all of the great, and there's all of the players that are on the scene these days, they all come from those other guys, they all come from Miles and Dizzy and Clifford and Kenny Dorham and Freddie Hubbard and whoever, I mean, when I was teaching at Cal State Northridge, I had a student from the Bay Area. He was obsessed with Woody Herman, with Woody Shaw, and he wanted to play like Woody Shaw. And I thought, God, so many guys want to sound like Woody Shaw. They want to play all those outside notes and the notes they're not singable, kind of. And he couldn't play a melody. So what I did is I took a Bobby Hackett with strings CD and I burned it for him. I said, take this home and listen to this. This is how to play. This guy knows how to play a melody. And so he took it home and kept it for a couple of weeks. And he came back for his lesson and he didn't want to play like Woody Shaw anymore. He learned something about playing. You don't want to really go out and copy somebody. Yeah. Woody Shaw, when he first came on the scene back in the early 60s, he did a gig and they wrote up a review of his gig, and the guy said, he sounds just like Freddie Hubbard. And that didn't please Woody at all. Yeah. So Woody went back and he got out the Slonimsky book of Thesaurus and Scales and the George Russell book of the Lydian concepts, and he started opening up some different harmonic things, and he came back with the voice that he ended up with, that he didn't want to be likened to Freddie Hubbard, Yeah. And so he found his own voice. And this is a very important thing for anybody that's learning to improvise. And even like when you're playing lead trumpet, as we were talking about earlier, you want to be influenced by the best guys out there, I mean, when I played on Buddy Rich's band, I had to play a certain way. And in Buddy's drumming style pretty much told me how he wanted me to play the lead trumpet book. If I listened to Buddy play the drums, my interpretation of the lead book was in his hands. It was there. And when I played on Woody Herman's band, it was different because the whole feel of the band was a little bit different, Yeah. And when I played on the Juggernaut band that Nat Pierce and Frank Capp had, that we played almost all bassy music. So then I had to adjust my style. Now, a guy playing studio music, you go every 3 hours, you got to change your style. You're doing rock and roll in the morning and Love Boat in the afternoon and Mork and Mindy at night, and you don't know what you're going to be doing. You walk into a studio and they put like 3 inches of paper in front of you on a stand, and you got to be very, very eclectic if you're doing a studio thing. So kids in school need to study classical, they need to study Dixieland, they need to study rock style. And I had to sub for a very famous trumpet player on a motion picture that was based around the 1929, 1930. And it was just one trumpet on the gig and a 80-piece orchestra. And they hired this guy because he was well known and popular. and he had no roots at all for Dixieland, and he couldn't play it, and they had to cancel the session. It cost them $10,000, and the writer was Dick Halligan, who used to be the keyboard player on Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And Dick's son Buddy was studying with me at the time. So Dick called me up and said, "Bobby, you play a cornet?" And I lied to him and said, "Yeah, oh yeah." But I borrowed a cornet from somebody, and I went in and I did the whole movie soundtrack on like playing like kind of Bix kind of style, you know. And because I listened to him and I knew how to play that style. And it wasn't who I was as a jazz player, but I knew how to imitate Louis or Bix or Bunny Berrigan, or even, you know, I can't play exactly like all those guys, but I know how to imitate Clifford or Kenny Dorham or Chet, or I can make myself sound a little bit like them and make you damn near believe it. You know? You
Yeah.
know? But
And
anyway, that I hope that answers that question.
oh
You know?
yeah. And Bobby, first of all, I just a lot of people are. I mean, everybody is. First of all, there's tons of messages coming in showing us. First of all, we love you, Bobby. Thank you so much for what you've done for trumpet players. I'm saying that, you know, you've done so much for us. And then I wanted to ask you, Bobby. There's. I'm trying to bunch these questions all into one big question. Uh, the question I get a lot too is, you um, what would you say to someone, Bobby, right now, like the kid in high school with his Arvin's book, thinking, "Do I really want to be a musician right now because of COVID?" And or even the pro that's been doing this for 50 years, who's sitting right now saying, "Do I really want to do this?" Bobby, what would you tell someone like that?
That's a big question. I'm just sorry. I'm scrolling across the top here, and I can't believe is on here. I'm seeing a whole bunch of former students of mine in England, a whole bunch of guys.
Oh yeah, everybody, and then even more on Facebook too.
Wow. I mean, it's unbelievable. Todd Gray. Oh my God, Todd's here.
Yeah.
And, oh my God. Look at Ross Daniels. Oh my God. These are, holy cow. I'm flattered that all these people jumped on here. Well, here's what I would say. You know, I did say earlier that, you know, I feel that kids that come out of school and want to have a career, you know, the music business is, there's no two careers. First of all, I would say there's no two careers that are identical. You know, it's just not a rubber stamp kind of a thing.
No.
Depending on, you know, if you want to be a kind of a person who goes to LA or New York or Chicago or the major cities or London, and you want to do like studio type of work, you know, you better be very broadly eclectic. You might better have all those styles down, as I just mentioned previously. Um, if you want to be just a jazz player, then don't waste your time playing stuff that doesn't apply. You know, I mean, Roy Hargrove, I met him when he was in high school in at the Arch Magnet School in Dallas when he was about 15 years old. And he wasn't studying classical music or anything like that. He was focusing on jazz. He became strictly a jazz trumpet player. And, you know, in my case, I never studied classical trumpet playing. That's why I couldn't do it. And I got caught a few times in the studio when I turned a page and there was double tonguing there. And I went, oh, you know, but I had to find a way to bullshit my way through it quickly. And I used alternate fingerings and stuff like that to convince the guy that I was double tonguing, and I really wasn't. I was just using a, you know, and I feel he never knew the difference, and to this day he doesn't know the difference unless he's tuned in right now, and I don't see his name up there. But the point being that, you know, I think when you're young, you don't always know. I mentioned this in the beginning. you don't always know where you're going to end up as a career unless you have a very specific thing. If you want to be, there's a kid here in Albuquerque who is a nice jazz player and everything. And he went to the university and he started taking some lessons with me. And the university was trying to get him to play bebop, you see. And he came to me, he says, I don't want to play that bebop stuff. And I'm going like, well, why not? You know? He says, well, it's not what I want to do. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He says, I want to be like he says, my heroes are like Chris Botti and Rick Braun and the smooth jazz types of guys, you know? And that's all he wanted to do. He wanted me to introduce him to Rick Braun and Chris Botti and Dave Koz and all those guys, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to interfere with their lives. And, you know, Chris Botti studied with me for a week up at a camp up in Oregon when he was about 15 or 16 years old. And Chris is a hell of a jazz player.
Well, yeah, he played the solo cello with Buddy's band.
Yeah. But I mean, Chris he can really play bebop, but he doesn't want you to know that. Because he's out doing that. He did that thing with Sting and all of that, and he got into playing smooth jazz. And you know, I buy his DVDs and CDs and stuff, and he's playing stuff that's kind of like smooth, you know, and it's stuff that you know you listen to in the background, kind of, you know, and that's what he's trying to do, and he's a hell of a player, you know. But if he goes out and plays just bebop, I mean, you know, he's not going to hit those those concerts where he plays for 10,000 people and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know, man, putting a career together individually, there's one thing that I used to do with students, and I still will do it once in a while. And this is a suggestion. If I have a student who's in like college or something like that, I'll say to him, get yourself a notebook and a ballpoint pen and go sit in a park bench somewhere quietly and pretend that you're 47 or 48 years old. Okay, this is just a pretend kind of thing. Write about yourself at 47 or 48 years old. Are you married? Yeah. Nice. Is she good? Friendly? Good. You know, you got kids? How many? 3, 1 of each. Okay. You know, are you working? What do you do? What kind of gigs do you do? You know, and what psychologically, this is a trick that when a person sits down and writes what they imagine themselves to be doing at the age of 47 or 48 years old, you're actually tapping into what they are conceiving themselves to be and what they are allowing themselves to be. It's a psychological trick, so you can see how much self-image or confidence a person has in themselves as far as looking into their future. And a lot of kids just say, oh God, I hope I make it. Oh man, I better get a degree to have something to fall back on. Well, if you get a degree to fall back on, you've already decided to fall back.
Yeah.
You follow? So you're looking at a failure. and you need to know that you've got a failure in your head. And so, like, one of the things that I wrote up years ago, it's an outline for career counseling. And when Roger Ingram was studying with me, I was saying like, well, what's your goal, Roger? I mean, what do you want to do? And Roger, you know, he was, you know, I don't know, he was 17 or something like that. And then he said, well, I just want to play. I says, okay, well, play for me. And he says, well, what? I said, something you want to play. I don't care. Just play what you want to play for a few minutes here. So he played for a few minutes and then he put the horn down. I said, okay, I'll give you $20 for your horn. He says, what do you mean? I says, well, you've accomplished your goal. Didn't you just, you said, all I want to do is play, and you just played, didn't you? You've already achieved your goal. You don't have much of a goal here. So he went, duh, you know. So we sat down in his lesson and put together a goal, and we wrote it all up, and it's very specific. He wants to be active, he wants to be successful, he wants to be doing this, he wants to be doing that, he wants to get all the calls, he wants to be improvising, he wants to be, you know, and at least he put together something that was meaningful. Now, if a kid's in college, if they're 19, 20, 21 years old and they're working on a degree, they got to be looking at a future. So why not sit down with a notebook and write up what you think your future might look like, and just find out about what you're allowing your mind to create for yourself. Does that make sense to you?
Oh yes, totally. It does.
You know,
And
and it's a good way for a person to look at career. Careers are unusual. You know, I did all kinds of stuff, and to be honest with you, I went to college studying to be an architect with a psychology minor, and I never dreamt that I would be a professional musician, because the way I was raised here, there was no jazz in schools when I was a kid. It didn't occur. I went to one of the first workshops ever in 1959. I was already out of high school, you know. And if you told your band director here that you wanted to stay in music, oh, you want to be a band director? No, I didn't want to be a band director. But you know, there was no encouragement to go out and have a career. There was a saxophone player here in Albuquerque that was at the university with me. He was a little bit older than me, but he listened to a Billy May record, and he just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So he found out a way to write to Billy May, care of Capitol Records in Hollywood, you know. And he just addressed this letter and said, I'd like to audition for Billy May's band, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, it's not the way you do it. He was very naive, but at least he was sticking his neck out trying to do something, you think? Yeah. And so when the band director at the university, his name was Bill Rhodes, who was like a classical clarinet player and didn't support jazz at all. And when he found out that this guy sent that letter to Billy May, he scorned him. He taught all over him. How dare you? Who do you think you are, writing a letter to Billy May? Instead of being, well, that's great, you know. You know, I hope it works out for you. Nothing positive. And so, you know, that's why I didn't ever pursue a career in music. But when I got drafted into the Army, I didn't want to shoot a gun and kill a bunch of people. There was no war going on then. But so I got into the NORAD band up in Colorado Springs, you know, and it was a great band. Had people like Paul Fontaine, Phil Wilson, a lot of people. Warren Looning was my replacement after I got out, but there were all kinds of people who ended up to be like quite well-known, successful musicians, you know. Yeah. And they were all in this band, and man, it was a great education for me. And that's all I did for 3 years was tour around and play concerts with the band, and I learned so much. And then while I was in the band, we were in New York playing the World's Fair, and the colonel suggested that the Tommy Dorsey band was looking for a trumpet player, and he said, "Why don't you go over and audition?" I went, "Who, me?" He says, "Yeah, go over there, you know." And I said, "Well, I don't know if I could ever play on a band like that." He said, "Well, get your butt over there, you know." And so I went over and I auditioned. I walked in the room, and the first guy I meet is Charlie Shavers. I went, "Oh my God," you know. And so I got in and I met everybody, and I told them I was there to audition, and I sat in the trumpet section, and I read and stood up, played a couple of solos, and they said, "You got it." And they got me out of the service 2.5 months early to join the Tommy Dorsey band. And there I was. I went, I can't believe it. I'm on the Tommy Dorsey band, you know. And then I went from there to Woody Herman and Buddy Rich and Benny Goodman and all the different ones. And I look back and I went, holy cow, I'm not an architect. I ended up to be a musician. And I'm the happiest guy on the planet for that, because I don't want to be an architect. You know, I know I made the right decision to be a musician. It's one of the greatest things in the world. Just to have spent my life playing music with. I got a chance to play with everybody from, I've been on the bandstand with Dizzy Gillespie. I've been on the bandstand with Al Cohn, Phil Woods. Dizzy Gillespie is my daughter's godfather, for God's sake, And, my house is full of pictures of my family with Dizzy and stuff like that. But I mean, I got a chance to play with Buddy Rich and Woody Herman and all those great people, man. I mean, are you kidding me? I have to pinch myself and say, wow. I look in the scrapbook and I go, holy cow, how did I do this? But I'm so lucky, man. I can't tell you. I'm humbled by the fact that I got a chance to do what I've done in my life. It's fantastic, playing, recording with Carl Fontana and people like that. Are you kidding? Tom Harrell? What?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, Bobby, I was gonna. First of all, the questions are keep coming in, and I don't want to keep you any longer, my friend. I know we're over our time, and I apologize, my friend. And I thank you so much for giving us this extra time. Thank you.
No problem.
And Bobby, one of the things I'm not trying to name, but I got to hang out with Walt Johnson last night, and he said, first of all, he was very complimentary of you, and he said, Bobby has helped so many people. Has helped so many people either get in the business in LA, or people that have, especially guys in the Maynard band, where they blow their chops or they do something. Everybody goes to see Bobby, and there's a reason why. And he says that Bobby's a special kind of person. Bobby, let me ask you a question. When you get these name guys, these amazing players, Roger Ingram, I can go on forever. They come to you and they say, help me. Because right now I got about 40 questions asking people, can you help me? Can he help me? And I'm sure you can. Bobby, are you still open for that, to take students on to help them with physical?
Absolutely. That's what I do. I teach pretty much every day online. With the pandemic now, I'm not able to do live lessons. I get together with the rhythm section in my sextet every Friday, and we play, because I have a huge studio. It's 2,500 square feet, big enough for a big band. But we spread out, bass, drums, and me, and sometimes Adolfo Acosta, who lives near me, he comes over and sits in with us too. He's in Tower Power.
Yeah.
But anyway, but that's what I do. I teach master classes at 5 different schools: the UNM here in Albuquerque, and New Jersey City University in Jersey City. I'm doing some master classes at Texas State University in San Antonio, Cal State Chico, an improv class once in a while, and Elmhurst College, where I have my doctorate in Chicago area. So I'm teaching a lot of master classes online, and I'm doing a lot of lessons. Some days I have, 5 or 6 hours of back-to-back private lessons. If they go to my website, bobbyshew.com, there's a thing called online lessons. It tells you what to do. There's an article that tells you how to sign up, what to do, and I'm not expensive. I mean, some of my students charge twice what I charge. I mean, Roger Ingram was charging way twice. I went, geez, But anyway, yeah, that's what I love to teach, and I love to be able to help people. And I read a lecture by Gustav Holst many years ago, that he said that anybody in the field of the arts, especially music, who gains has any kind of success, owes it to the next generation to do a 180 turnaround and show the next generation how you've made some success, how you've managed to succeed here. And to not help somebody is a crime of omission. And I went, oh, that hit me in the face like a wet mop, you know, crime of omission. Well, that's like trying to help a little old lady across the street. You know, you got to do her, you got to help. And if, you know, I wrote a tune years ago called I Can't Say No. People call me up and they say, Bob, and I'm tired as hell and I'm exhausted. And they say, oh, can you help me, Bobby? I said, yeah, I can't say no. Yeah.
Well, Bobby, we are forever grateful for all this. You know, you're a teacher's teacher's teacher, you know. And
Well, I have a one thing. I do have an awful lot of teachers coming to me and realizing that I can help them teach better, you know. So they're getting a lot of information that you know, like the four fundamentals and stuff, and they're finding out how they can help their students in a little bit better way. And so that's what we'd like to do, is we'd like to be able to make it possible for everybody that picks up the horn to succeed and have an easy time with it. There's no sense in people struggling out there, but they got to get the right information, you know.
and
I've enjoyed this, Joseph, very much, man, and I thank you for involving me in this. You know, I know you've been interviewed quite an awful lot of famous people and so forth. I saw you the website and I went, holy cow, he finally got to me.
no, I just I was really, because I've never met you before, and like I said, everybody says just reach out to him. He's a great guy, you know, and so I just took that leap of faith. And Bobby, I'm glad I did. Guys, if in conclusion, first of all, Bobby, again, thank from all of us, thank you for all you do for us. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. You know, we love you, man. You've done just so much for us, and I want to thank everybody that, especially around the world, who stayed up late and watched this thing. You know, I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah. Those people in England, there, it's like way in. Man, are you kidding? It's 1 o'clock in the morning and over there.
yeah, and everybody who tuned in today, you can reach Bobby Shew at bobbyshew.com. Go ahead and reach out to him if if you want to get a lesson, or if you need him to help you with anything. Bobby, after this, if you could give me a call, I have something to ask of you, if it's okay. And then, guys, thanks so much for joining this webinar. Again, there's a lifetime worth of lessons here. And guys, have a great day. Bobby, thank you again. And we'll all talk to you soon.
Well, I just want to say to all of you, just make sure you listen to some good music. You know, get out and listen. Don't just listen to the hot items, the hot shots, the little young lions running around. Get back and find out, you know, where all this music came from. Listen to Louis. You don't have to copy Louis Armstrong, but damn, realize that that guy didn't have Bob Reeves and Yamaha and all those people in those days. He had to go to a blacksmith to get a mouthpiece made, you know. So listen to some good music and get yourself, and everybody learn to improvise. You won't be sorry. You don't have to be Freddie Hubbard or Miles Davis or Clifford Brown, but learn to improvise and just have fun finding some creative stuff in your life. Thank you all so much, Joseph, and thank you all for joining in on this thing. I hope I helped you somehow, and maybe I'll meet some of you someday.
Abrazos, Maestro. Thank you so much.
All
And
right.
we'll talk later, guys. Have a great day. Thanks, Bobby.
Bye-bye.